the truth behind Pegasus and ancient Greek myths. Picture it. The majestic winged horse, Pegasus, soaring through the skies with the great hero Hercules on his back. They're the perfect team, right? The very picture of divine strength and mythical grace, off to battle monsters and save the day. But what if I told you that picture is completely wrong? What if the image seared into our minds, thanks to beloved movies and pop culture, is a total fiction? The real story of Pegasus is way more complex, more tragic, and stars a completely different hero. It's a tale that starts with a monstrous birth, leads to impossible quests, and ends with a heartbreaking fall from grace, all driven by human pride. It's a story where the horse isn't just a sidekick, but a divine being with his own destiny, a story that we've gotten wrong for centuries. So, let us set the record straight and uncover the truth behind one of the most famous creatures in all of Greek mythology. Part 1. The monstrous birth, a beginning forged in blood. To really understand Pegasus, you can't start on sunlit Mount Olympus. You have to go somewhere much darker. You have to start in a desecrated temple, with a story of beauty, violation, and a terrifying transformation. You have to start with Medusa. Long before she was a monster with snakes for hair and a gaze that turned men to stone, Medusa was a mortal woman. She was a stunningly beautiful priestess serving in the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. Her life was dedicated to the goddess, but her beauty caught the eye of a power far more wild and uncontrollable. Poseidon, the god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses. Poseidon didn't ask for what he wanted. He took it, right there, in the sacred halls of Athena's own temple. He violated the young priestess. It was an act of profound sacrilege that defiled not just Medusa, but the sanctity of the goddess's home. When Athena found out, she was furious. But the rules of the gods are twisted and often cruel. She couldn't punish her powerful uncle Poseidon. So, her rage, mixed with jealousy and betrayal, was turned on the victim. It was Medusa who got the curse. Her beautiful hair, the very hair that had captivated the sea god, was twisted into a writhing mass of venomous snakes. Her face became so hideous that any mortal who looked at it was instantly turned to stone. Medusa the priestess was gone. In her place was a Gorgon, a monster, banished to the ends of the earth, feared and hated by everyone. And yet, inside her, she still carried the children of Poseidon. This is where the hero we think we know, Perseus, steps onto the stage. He was given the impossible task of bringing back Medusa's head, and he got a lot of help from the gods. Armed with a reflective shield from Athena, winged sandals from Hermes, and a super sharp sword, he found Medusa in her lair. Looking only at her reflection to avoid her petrifying gaze, Perseus swung his blade and cut off her head. It was a moment of brutal, heroic violence. But from that violence, something miraculous happened. From the blood that gushed from Medusa's neck, two beings sprang into existence, fully formed. The first was Chrysaor, a giant sometimes shown with a golden sword. The second was a creature of breathtaking beauty, a horse with wings of the purest white that unfurled, as if they were born to catch the wind. This was Pegasus and his name. It's a huge clue to where he came from. The ancient poet Hesiod said it came from the Greek word pegai, meaning springs or waters, because he was born near the springs of the great ocean. It's a direct link to his father Poseidon, ruler of all waters. Pegasus wasn't just a horse that could fly. He was the son of the sea god and a tragically cursed Gorgon, born from violence and divine revenge. He was a paradox from his very first breath, a creature of pure grace born from a monstrous end. He was proof that beauty can rise from tragedy, but he was not Perseus's sidekick. As Pegasus burst into the world, he soared upwards towards the heavens, leaving the hero far behind. Perseus, after all, didn't need a flying horse. He was already wearing Hermes' winged sandals. Their stories crossed for a single, bloody moment, and then split forever. Pegasus was destined for a different rider and a very different fate. Part 2. The forgotten hero Bellerophon's rise. The hero whose story is truly tied to Pegasus is a name most of us have forgotten, completely overshadowed by guys like Hercules. His name was Bellerophon, a prince from Corinth, and his story is one of incredible heroism and devastating pride. Unlike the squeaky clean heroes we see in movies, Bellerophon's journey starts in darkness and exile. He was marked by bloodshed from a young age. The stories vary, but the most common one is that he accidentally killed his own brother. Or maybe a local nobleman named Bellerophon, an act which may have earned him the name Bellerophon or Killer of Belleros. This terrible accident forced him to flee his home, looking for someone to purify him of his crime. His journey took him to the kingdom of Tyrants, ruled by King Pegasus. The king followed the sacred laws of hospitality, welcomed the young prince, and cleansed him of his guilt. For a while, things were good. Bellerophon was handsome and charming, and it wasn't long before he caught the eye of the queen Stenobia. The queen fell hard for the young exile and tried to seduce him, but Bellerophon, trying to be an honorable guest and not betray the king who had helped him, turned her down again and again. Scorned and furious, the queen's crush turned into vengeful spite. She ran to her husband, King Pegasus, and fed him a lie that Bellerophon had tried to assault her. King Pegasus was consumed by rage. He wanted Bellerophon dead, But those same sacred laws of hospitality meant he couldn't just kill a guest under his own roof. That would bring the wrath of the gods down on him. So, the king came up with a sneaky, cowardly plan. He called Bellerophon in and gave him a special mission: deliver a sealed tablet to his father-in-law, King Iobates, who ruled the distant land of Lycia. Bellerophon, totally clueless, agreed. He set off on his journey, completely unaware that he was carrying his own death warrant. The message inside the tablet was simple: please kill the man who brings this to you. When he got to Lycia, Bellerophon was again welcomed like royalty. King Iobates saw a noble prince and feasted him for 9 straight days. It was only on the 10th day that he finally asked about the tablet. When Iobates broke the seal and read the chilling message, he realized he was in the same bind as Priestus. He'd already hosted Bellerophon as a guest. Killing him outright was off the table. So Iobates decided to send Bellerophon on a series of impossible quests, missions so deadly no mortal could possibly survive. He'd let the monsters of Lycia do his dirty work for him, and the very first of these suicide missions was to slay a creature that was terrorizing the entire country. A monster considered the unholy offspring of Typhon and Echidna. He was to kill the Chimera. Bellerophon knew he couldn't face a beast like that on foot. He was a great warrior, but he was still just a man. He needed an edge. He needed a miracle. He needed a winged horse. His mind turned to the whispers he'd heard of a wild, untamable stallion with wings that grazed the clouds, a creature named Pegasus. This quest, meant to be his end, would instead lead him to his greatest ally and the true start of his legend. Part 3. Taming the Untamable, the Goddess, and the Golden Bridle. So Bellerophon had his impossible task: slay the Chimera. But before he could even think about the monster, he had another impossible task to deal with: finding and taming the wild, divine Pegasus. This wasn't like tracking some animal. Pegasus was a creature of myth, son of a god, totally free. He belonged to no one. Knowing he was out of his depth, Bellerophon sought out the wisest seer in Lycia, a man named Polyidus. The seer listened and understood just how big this challenge was. He told Bellerophon that taming Pegasus was beyond mortal power. If he wanted to succeed, he'd need help from a god, specifically from Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy. Polyidus told Bellerophon to go to Athena's temple and sleep on her altar, to pray for a miracle. Bellerophon did exactly that. He went to the temple, made his offerings, and laid down on the cold stone altar, drifting into a desperate, exhausted sleep. That night, he had a dream. The goddess Athena appeared before him, clad in her brilliant armor. She acknowledged his courage and told him she would help. But first, he had to honor her father Poseidon by sacrificing a white bull. Then, she gave him a gift, something that shimmered with an otherworldly light: a golden bridle. This, she explained, was no ordinary piece of tack. It was a divine charm that would let him safely approach and tame the winged horse. When Bellerophon woke with a start, the dream was still crystal clear in his mind. And there, lying on the altar right next to him, was the golden bridle. It was real. The goddess had answered his prayer. Following the seer's advice, Bellerophon knew just where to go. He was told Pegasus often drank from the pure waters of the Pierian spring in his home city of Corinth. With the golden bridle in hand, he journeyed there, and sure enough, he found the magnificent creature, its white coat gleaming in the sun as it lowered its head to drink. Anyone else who got close would have been met with a flash of hooves and the powerful beat of wings as Pegasus shot into the sky. But Bellerophon held up the golden bridle from Athena. The divine magic did its trick. Pegasus became calm and allowed the hero to approach. Gently, Bellerophon slipped the golden bit into the horse's mouth and fitted the bridle over its head. In that moment, the impossible happened. The wild, divine spirit and the ambitious mortal hero were joined. Bellerophon climbed onto Pegasus's back, feeling the immense power beneath him. He was no longer just a man on a horse. He was a warrior fused with a divine force. The bond was sealed. This was the true partnership of the myth, not a friendship from birth like in the cartoons, but one forged through desperation, divine help, and a shared purpose. Together, they soared into the sky, a mortal man riding a child of the gods, flying off to face a monster born from the pits of the underworld. Part 4. The heroic duo battling the Chimera. With Pegasus as his ally, Bellerophon flew back to Lycia to face the monster king Iobates was sure would kill him. The Chimera wasn't just a beast. It was a living nightmare, a grotesque monster that was chaos and destruction made real. Ancient poets like Homer describe it in terrifying detail. It had the head and body of a lion. Sprouting from its back was the head of a goat, and its tail was a living, hissing serpent with venomous fangs. And to top it all off, the Chimera breathed fire, scorching the earth and turning fertile land into blackened waste. For any hero on the ground, the Chimera was a death trap. Get too close to the front, you'd face the lion's claws and a blast of fire. Try to attack from the side, and the serpent's tail would whip around and deliver a fatal bite. It was a perfect killing machine, seemingly invincible. This is exactly why King Iobates sent Bellerophon to fight it. It was a death sentence. But the king hadn't counted on one thing: a man who could attack from the sky. Riding Pegasus, Bellerophon had the ultimate tactical advantage. He could soar high above the battlefield, completely out of reach of the lion's charge and the serpent's venom. The enraged Chimera would blast fire into the air, but Pegasus was fast and agile, dodging the flames with ease. From up there, Bellerophon could see the entire monster, study its moves, and plan his attack. He started by swooping down, firing arrows into the creature's thick hide. The arrows hit their mark, wounding the beast and making it even angrier, but they weren't enough to kill it. The Chimera was unnaturally tough. Bellerophon knew he needed a smarter plan. He had to get past the fire and strike its heart. And then, a brilliant idea hit him, a plan that combined his own cleverness with the unique advantage Pegasus gave him. He took a big lump of lead and fixed it to the tip of his spear. Then, urging Pegasus into a steep, daring dive, he flew straight towards the Chimera's gaping, fiery mouth. Just as the monster unleashed another blast of flame, Bellerophon thrust his spear deep down its throat. The effect was instant and catastrophic. The intense heat of the Chimera's own fire melted the lead on the spear. The molten metal poured down the creature's throat and into its vital organs, suffocating it from the inside out. The monster let out a final, gurgling roar and collapsed, dead. The impossible had been done. The countryside was safe. Bellerophon, the exiled prince, had defeated one of the most fearsome monsters in mythology, but he hadn't done it alone. The victory belonged just as much to Pegasus. It was the horse's flight that turned an unwinnable battle into a legendary triumph. They were the perfect team, of fusion of mortal cunning and divine power. When Bellerophon returned to King Iobates, he wasn't met with quiet relief, but with the shock of a king who had just watched a man cheat death and become a living legend. But what if I told you that this incredible victory wasn't the end of Bellerophon's story, but the beginning of his tragic downfall? If you're loving this deep dive into the real myth of Pegasus, and you want to keep uncovering the forgotten truths of mythology, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when a hero's pride soars even higher than his winged horse. Part 5. The Price of Pride. Bellerophon's downfall. Defeating the Chimera should have been the end of Bellerophon's troubles. King Iobates, stunned, could no longer deny that the hero was special, but he was still suspicious. So instead of rewarding him, he sent Bellerophon on another suicide mission, to fight the Salimi, a tribe of famously fierce mountain warriors. Once again, Bellerophon mounted Pegasus, and once again the winged horse gave him an unbeatable advantage. Flying high above the Salimi, he was untouchable. He simply dropped massive boulders on them, scattering their forces and winning without ever getting a scratch. He returned to Iobates victorious. Still not satisfied, the king immediately sent him on a third impossible task, to battle the legendary Amazons, and for a third time Bellerophon and Pegasus rode into battle and won. By now, Bellerophon was famous across the known world. He was the man who couldn't be beaten, the rider of the divine winged horse, the greatest hero of his time. King Iobates finally gave up, realizing this man was clearly favored by the gods. He not only gave Bellerophon his daughter's hand in marriage, but also made him heir to the throne. Bellerophon had it all: fame, wealth, power, a royal family, and the most magnificent creature in the world as his companion. But with every victory, something inside Bellerophon started to rot. His confidence morphed into arrogance. His courage curdled into hubris. He began to see himself not just as a hero loved by the gods, but as their equal. He'd conquered monsters and armies that no other mortal could. He had a divine horse. Surely that meant he was more than human. The praise of the people and the weight of his own legend began to poison his mind. This festering pride led to his final, fatal mistake. He decided that a palace on earth just wasn't good enough for him anymore. His rightful place, he believed, was on Mount Olympus with the gods. He convinced himself he deserved to live in their golden halls and be one of them. So, he mounted Pegasus one last time, not for a battle, but for an assault on heaven itself. He spurred his winged steed higher and higher, leaving the mortal world far below, climbing through the clouds toward the gleaming home of the gods. This ultimate act of arrogance did not go unnoticed. Zeus, king of the gods, watched from his throne with growing anger. This mortal, this speck of dust, dared to force his way into the home of the immortals. Such pride was a challenge to the entire cosmic order and could not be ignored. Zeus didn't need a thunderbolt. A much more subtle, humiliating punishment would do. He sent a single tiny creature to do his bidding. A gadfly, a small insect, flew up and stung Pegasus. The divine horse, startled and in pain, bucked wildly. For the first time, the perfect connection between rider and horse was broken. Bellerophon, caught completely by surprise, lost his grip and was thrown from Pegasus's back. He fell. It was a long, terrifying fall from the edge of heaven all the way back down to earth. Pegasus, now free, continued his flight up to Olympus, where he was welcomed. But Bellerophon just kept falling, his dreams of godhood shattering around him. Ancient sources disagree on what happened next. Some say he died in the fall, but others, like Homer, paint a far more tragic picture. In that version, Bellerophon survived, but he was left crippled, blind, and completely broken. Cursed by the very gods he tried to join, he was forced to wander the wandering plain for the rest of his miserable life, alone, hated and tormented by the memory of what he once was. Homer says he spent his last days devouring his own soul, a man who flew to the sun only to be cast back into the darkest shadow. His story became the ultimate cautionary tale against pride, a warning to any mortal who forgets their place. Part 6. The true master of Pegasus' service to Zeus. While Bellerophon's story ended in lonely tragedy, Pegasus' journey was far from over. After throwing his arrogant rider, the winged horse didn't just fly back to some spring on earth. Instead, he completed the flight to Mount Olympus. Born from a god and now free from his mortal master, he was finally returning to where he belonged. On Olympus, Pegasus wasn't seen as an intruder. He was welcomed. He was, after all, the son of Poseidon. He was brought to the celestial stables, home to the magnificent horses that drew the chariots of the gods. Here he was given a new job, a new purpose, and a new master. Zeus himself, the very god who had just engineered Bellerophon's downfall. Pegasus's new duty was one of immense honor. He became the bearer of Zeus's thunderbolts. When the king of the gods was preparing for war or about to deliver judgment on the world, it was Pegasus who would carry the divine weapons, forged by the Cyclopes in the heart of volcanoes from their forge to Zeus's hand. This wasn't the job of a simple animal or a hero's sidekick. It was a position of trust, right next to the most powerful being in the cosmos. Pegasus was now a key part of the divine arsenal. For years, Pegasus served Zeus faithfully, a symbol of the heavens' power, as fast as the lightning he carried, and his loyalty was rewarded. As a final honor, Zeus granted Pegasus true immortality by transforming him into a constellation, a pattern of stars that would shine in the night sky forever. And so, if you look up at the autumn sky in the northern hemisphere, you can still see the great square of Pegasus, a celestial monument to the winged horse. His time with Bellerophon was just one chapter in a much larger, more divine story. His ultimate master was Zeus, and his final destiny wasn't on Earth, but among the stars, a permanent reminder of his epic journey. Part 7. The source of inspiration. The Muses and the Hippocrene. While Pegasus's adventures with Bellerophon are about war and power, there's another, equally important side to his myth, one that has nothing to do with battles and everything to do with art, poetry, and inspiration. This is his connection to the Muses. The Muses were the 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. They were the divine goddesses of poetry, music, dance, and all knowledge. They lived on Mount Helicon, a place sacred to their creativity. One day the Muses got into a singing competition. They sang with such divine beauty that all of nature, the sky, the sea, the rivers paused in rapt attention. Mount Helicon itself was so overcome with pleasure that it began to swell up, growing larger and larger, as if it wanted to reach the heavens. This strange sight alarmed the gods. Poseidon, seeing the mountain's arrogant growth, ordered his son Pegasus to do something. Pegasus flew down from Olympus and struck the swelling mountaintop with his hoof. Where his hoof hit the rock, the mountain immediately stopped growing, and from that very spot, a spring of crystal clear water burst forth. This spring was named the Hippocrene, which literally means the horse's spring. But the Hippocrene was no ordinary spring. Its waters were magical. It became sacred to the Muses, and it was believed that anyone who drank from it would be blessed with divine artistic inspiration. It was the fountain of poetry, the source of creative genius. This act forever linked Pegasus to the world of art. He wasn't just a warrior's horse, he was the spark of inspiration. His raw power, the same power that could tame a mountain, could also give birth to the most beautiful of human creations, poetry. This connection is so deep that the Muses themselves were sometimes called the Pegasus. Pegasus became their companion, a symbol of the soaring flight of imagination and the untamed spirit of creativity. He embodies both the warrior's courage and the poet's soul, and that's a huge part of what makes his myth last. Part 8. Debunking the myths. Why Hercules and Perseus get the credit. Now we get to the big one. The modern myth that has almost completely wiped out the ancient truth. Why does everyone picture Pegasus with Hercules? And why does Perseus, his co-star at birth, so often get credited as his rider? Let's start with Perseus. The confusion here is at least understandable, even if it's wrong. Pegasus was born as a direct result of what Perseus did. The image of the hero beheading Medusa as the winged horse springs forth as a powerful one. Later art, especially during the Renaissance, did take some liberties and show Perseus riding Pegasus, mostly because it just looked cooler. A hero on a flying horse is way more dramatic than a hero with tiny wings on his ankles. This idea was cemented in pop culture by movies like the 1981 Clash of the Titans and its 2010 remake, which flat out made Pegasus the ride of Perseus. But in the original myths, it's clear Perseus had the winged sandals and didn't need him. The Hercules connection, though, is a much more modern invention with almost zero basis in ancient mythology. In all of classical literature, there is no story that links the hero Heracles, the Greek name for Hercules, with Pegasus. Their myths happen in completely separate worlds. Hercules had his 12 labors and his own set of monsters. Pegasus had his adventures with Bellerophon and his job serving Zeus. So where did the idea come from? For most of us, the answer is a single, incredibly powerful source: Disney's 1997 movie, Hercules. In the film, Zeus creates Pegasus from a cloud as a baby shower gift for his son. Peg is portrayed as a loyal, funny, and bird-brained sidekick. It's an incredibly charming and memorable portrayal, and for generations it has become the definitive version of the myth. Of course, Disney has a long history of changing and simplifying dark, complex myths to make them family-friendly. For Hercules, the filmmakers blended characters, changed timelines, and invented relationships to tell their story. Giving Hercules a flying horse as a best friend makes for a great movie. But in doing so, they rewrote mythology in the public's mind. Bellerophon, the tragic, prideful hero, was forgotten. Pegasus's violent birth and his deep connection to poetry were erased. He was turned into a cute and loyal sidekick. This isn't unique to Pegasus, but the cultural impact of Disney as Hercules was so huge that its version is now more famous than the original truth. The real myth has been buried under layers of modern storytelling, which is a fascinating reminder that mythology isn't static, it's a living thing, constantly being retold and reinterpreted by every new generation. Part 9. The Enduring Legacy, a symbol through the ages. So, after stripping away the cartoons and digging into the ancient texts, what is the real legacy of Pegasus? What does he truly stand for? The answer is so much richer than just being a hero's flying horse. First, Pegasus is a symbol of divine power and untamable freedom. Born from a god and a gorgon, he is a creature that exists on the line between the monstrous and the divine. That wildness is key to who he is. It took a magic, god-given bridle to tame him, and even then, his ultimate loyalty was to Zeus, not a mortal. His flight represents rising above earthly limits to touch the heavens. He's also a powerful symbol of creation's dual nature. He's born from a horrific act of violence, yet he himself is a creature of pure beauty and grace. That paradox points to a deep idea, that beauty can come from tragedy, and light can emerge from darkness. Through his story with Bellerophon, Pegasus becomes part of a profound cautionary tale. He's the vehicle for Bellerophon's heroic rise, but also the instrument of his tragic fall. The pair represents the peak of human potential when helped by the gods, but also the disastrous results of hubris. When Pegasus throws Bellerophon at the gates of Olympus, he's enforcing the cosmic order, reminding us all that there's a line between mortals and gods that you just don't cross. But maybe his most enduring legacy is as a symbol of inspiration. His creation of the Hippocrene spring, the sacred fountain of the Muses, cemented him as a muse for poets and artists forever. To ride Pegasus became a metaphor for the flight of poetic genius, for that moment when a creative spark lets the mind soar to new heights. That's why his image has been so loved by writers and artists for centuries. He represents that elusive, divine spark of creativity every artist is searching for. Pegasus isn't a simple character. He's a divine being, a warrior's steed, a muse for poets, and a celestial constellation. He is a bridge between the mortal and the immortal, earth and sky, violence and art. His story is a timeless reminder that the myths we think we know are often hiding deeper, more complicated truths. So, the next time you see a picture of a winged horse, look beyond the cartoon. The truth behind Pegasus isn't a simple tale of a hero and his trusty steed. It's a sprawling epic that starts with a cursed priestess and the god of the sea. It's the story of a forgotten hero, Bellerophon, whose ambition flew him too close to the sun, and whose downfall is one of history's greatest warnings against pride. The true master of Pegasus wasn't a mortal at all, but Zeus, the king of the gods, for whom he carried the thunderbolts of heaven. And his most lasting gift to us wasn't a ride into battle, but a kick of his hoof that brought forth the spring of divine inspiration for all artists to come. The popular stories are fun, but the original myths are powerful. They show us the complex, often messy, nature of the ancient world, a world where beauty is born from violence, where heroes are tragically flawed, and where a winged horse can be both a weapon of war and a source of poetry. The truth, as it so often is way more fascinating than fiction. So who do you think was the real hero of this story? Bellerophon, the ambitious mortal, or Pegasus, the divine being who outlasted him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.